107.7 The Bronx and 1077thebronx.com. Proudly nominated for a National Association of Broadcasters 2019 Marconi Award for Best College Radio Station of the Year. Live from the Kiwanis Public House Studio at Rider University. This is the Sports Fever. I'm your host, Anthony Collesano, and alongside me today, as always, it's Don DeRosa, no Gugliotta, or otherwise known as Gooks. And we have a very special guest. He was on last week's edition of Your Careers Calling, Mr. Dr. Joe Havlik. Joe, it was a pleasure having you on last week, and I'm very excited to have you on today. How are you?
I'm good, Anthony. Thank you. That's a nice introduction. It's great. It was great here last Sunday, and just meeting the guys here today. It looks like it's going to be fun this week too. Yeah,
absolutely. Now I know when we did the show last week, it was mainly just about obviously your career and kind of your superpower and all that stuff. Well, it's a totally different show. Obviously, if you want to give a little background of your career, you can, or do you just want to dive right in?
Oh, yeah. Well, just a quick setup.
Yeah, quick.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of careers, as it turns out. I didn't mention this too much last week, but I was an engineer, businessman, counselor, coach, the whole bit. And then during that last career, I just retired from that last career in November. So now I'm doing sports psychology full time. So I picked up the PhD during that last career.
That's awesome.
Very awesome.
Yeah, and obviously Noah came up with some very insightful and elaborate questions for you. So Noah, if you want to start, what's like the first main one you have that you really want to kind of get into?
Yeah, okay. So I'm really excited today because Anthony told me about this, and I was like, oh my God, like this is what I want to know, that the mindset and everything, and I think Joe's ready, So I think we'll start out with the Gary Dell'Abate one.
Yeah.
So we were talking about it before. Obviously, Gary Dell'Abate, famous producer from the Howard Stern Show, in 2009, threw out the first pitch at Citi Field, Mets game. And he talked about before how nervous he was, how he was trying to prepare for it. He talked to a sports psychologist. And I wanted to know what the mindset is before that. How do you handle that situation?
Well, it's really kind of a strange setup for Dell'Abate. And by the way, I'm a big Howard Stern, as we were mentioning before.
Exactly.
And Baba Booey, that whole thing.
It's classic.
He's a really funny guy.
Yeah.
Obviously not the greatest pitcher in the world. I did, after, these questions were great, by the way, Noah, so thank you.
Yeah,
helped me to prep for this. Yeah, sure. But so I dialed up that YouTube and looked at it, and the ball's really in the stands. I mean, it didn't even come close to the catcher. And from a sports psychological perspective, and I hear you say that he went to a sports psychologist beforehand.
Yes.
From that perspective, that's a really kind of strange thing because it's such a simple act.
Yeah.
Normally thought. There are examples in the history of sports of folks who have really gone under, great athletes who have succumbed to the pressure of the game. And the throwing one, the archetypical example is Steve Sachs. I don't know if you remember that name. This is dating me. This is back in the 80s. Great second baseman for L.A., the Dodgers. Mm-hmm. And, came up through the farm system, great bat, 5-tool player kind of guy. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden, he made a bad throw to first. And I mean, like in the stands, like Dell'Abate. And it just persisted.
Is it almost like kind of what Chuck Knobloch was back with the Yankees?
Chuck Knobloch is another great case.
And also,
same kind of deal.
Mackie Sasser, right, for the Mets,
Every once in a while, these otherwise great athletes
just
lose it. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes a confidence thing, and then it starts to spiral downhill.
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting. I think that goes for a lot of athletes in any sport, too. Like, even one, I think, for the New York Yankees, when it comes to Andujar, when he was at third base, he would always try and clutch his throw because he'd have a fear of throwing to first, so it's mentally in his head. So I find this really interesting with any sport. It really is just a topic that no one thinks of until you really get into it.
And it manifests, and then but that's what's funny too, I didn't even think of it from that professional aspect. And I had a class last year, and they talked about Mackie Sasser, how there was one play where I think he got hurt at home plate or something like that, and then from then on, he'd be fine when he wasn't thinking about it, but when just throwing to the pitcher, it was a double clutch and couldn't get it there. So that's great.
It's hard, like Gary Dell'Abate notwithstanding. I mean, it's hard to prep for something like that. What do you do?
Yeah.
A spinoff, one of the other things I do is test anxiety reduction. It's performance psychology, just like sports psychology, same kind of thing. And, well, I'll ask you, what is the number one rule for reducing your test anxiety?
Breathing?
Breathe.
Well, now that's classic and good. That's but it's not the number one, believe it or not. And like breathing and relaxing your muscles are volitional things that you have control. The number one thing is to study for the test. That's the best way to reduce. So how does that transfer to Gary? I mean, he should have practiced pitching. And from the way he threw it, it looks like he didn't. But maybe he did.
And that's another thing, because on the show...
Well, yeah, did he say that he did?
This is a good point, because he talked... John Hine, who's also on the show, he had a website, Jump the Shark, and he does the wrap-up show. But he talked about how they were supposed to have a catch, and something happened, it rained or something like that, and it didn't end up happening. So
when you talk about it, that doesn't surprise me. This was not a setup. That doesn't surprise me, because that's how I would be terrified too. If I hadn't thrown a baseball for years and I had to throw it 90 feet accurately, 60, 90, whatever, it was 60 feet accurately,
60 and a half.
I don't think I'd throw it in the stands, but I'd be nervous.
But it's also just the pressure, the compounding stuff around you. That's a huge ballpark.
Yeah.
And Artie Lang was talking about on the show too how he threw at a minor league. And he was like, it is different, but still, I was able to get it across the plate. So it's interesting to see also how the crowd and the pressure there also gets to you. But that's perfect, because we just mentioned earlier about, and that's a great point. Like, I thought about that he did not practice.
He should have practiced.
Yeah.
And so to generalize the answer to your question, so like the Steve Saxes and Chuck Knoblochs of the world.
Yeah.
So they're in a bad spot because, their paycheck depends on being able to make it to first base. So for those guys, now you're talking about changing the mindset. It's almost an identity issue. Steve Sachs, that's my identity. Of course I can make it first, and now I can't. Yeah. Now it really rocks my world. Mm-hmm. Now I have to do work on my identity and what my self-talk is. What am I thinking about it? And at some point you say, the words that you're saying are, I don't know if I can do this or not. Which seems ridiculous, knowing what kind of athlete he was. Mm-hmm. But that's what he's saying to himself, probably. Now we got to get into meditation. You got to relax. You got to substitute your thoughts and think about things like, of course I make it. I'm Steve Sachs. Of course I can throw it to first base. And then practice that and do that while you're deep breathing and you're relaxing of your muscles.
I mean, you brought up the meditation stuff, and I remember you mentioned to myself and Wanda about Phil Jackson and how he did kind of, I guess it was Zen.
Yeah.
And like that's probably, I don't know if that was probably why he had those great runs with those teams back in the day, because he was able just to, I guess, mentally have a grasp on every player. I think that's what made him like the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah, I think so. And that Anthony kind of jumps us, I think, to that Kobe question that you presented. What about the Mamba mindset?
Yeah.
And I think that was, I saw him play in high school, actually.
Lower
this
Merion.
kind of dates me again, but I saw him play.
96.
Yeah. So, great play. He had the Mamba mentality before he met Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember 3 guys on him and him still rising up and hitting the shot. They just ran. They didn't play the whole game 3-on-1 against him, but every once in a while they'd run 3 at him, and he could still handle that. I mean, it's almost like he relished that. That's the kind of competitor he was.
He lived for that.
Yeah.
He wanted it.
I mean, I think it was just a match made in heaven for those two. I don't know about, I think Shaq Shaq was the main issue in kind of that whole.
Well, early on in the relationship, it was really rocky.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Because he had to kind of break him almost.
Yeah.
And then, as it turned out, when Jackson came back, they let Jackson go, and then Jackson came back. And when he came back, then they really fused. And then I think Kobe bought into Jackson's program a lot more when he came back. And then he was into the whole meditation. And so when I talk about meditation from a sports psychological perspective, I always bring up Kobe and MJ. He's a big meditator. Mm-hmm. So all the Phil Jackson disciples, who really succeeded, took that on.
Yeah, so you would say that like Kobe was he was just like a special case, like he worked harder, but he had the right mindset.
He had the right mindset, and he's got a lot. His dad was a professional basketball player too, Jelly Bean, And so he kind of knew, and he was, when you grow up in that household, your dad's at the table talking about, hey, I know all these NBA players. This is what you do. You kind of think to yourself, I can do that. It's a big identity thing. I can do that. If Dad can do that, I can do that. But he took it a step further than Jelly. I mean, he was great. Jelly Bean was a good, basketball player. He was one of the greatest of all time. And I can remember there was one time where he was at the free throw line and Mutombo was giving him, some back talk or something like that. I'll bet you $500,000. $500,000 that I'll make this, and he makes it. That's like putting pressure on yourself to do it. But it's part of his identity, and I think, like you were saying, like he relished it. He took it on, and so when he put the pressure on himself, the identity aspect of it even intensified, I think. So he knew I could do that. This is what I do. This not just do I make a free throw. I'm the guy who makes free throws when the pressure's on the line.
Yeah.
So I might not have been as good before the pressure was on, but now that there's $500,000 on it, now I know I'll make it.
So you would say though, from because I know we were talking about from sport to sport, that's the kind of same attitude to have, to be, to as a person say, this is who I am. I'm this killer, like this guy who's just gonna go out there and win, and just so that you would say that that's kind of the attitude to have, or
sure, that is certainly something that would I want all of my athletes to think that they were born to win everything and win when the stakes were highest? Absolutely. That is something to shoot for. That is what we want.
That's what every coach dreams to have.
Just that right mindset.
Yep. Because it's one less thing they have to do as a coach, because they know that they're self-motivated. Kind of like what Lynn says every day about Stella. She's just self-motivated. She just lets her do her thing. She does great things on the court.
Happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's still leading the NCAA in women's basketball.
So is that
point?
Is that a lot? Like, because the season's over. So did she lock it up?
I think she locked it up. She's by a full point. So
is this a rider athlete?
Stella Johnson.
I see. Yeah.
Tremendous player. I can check right now if you guys want the NCAA women's basketball.
Yeah, she's one of the best players in the country. Like
Is that right?
Yeah. She's done a
24.5, and then there's Chelsea Perry at 23.4.
Yeah. So she locked it up. So I mean. Yeah, I mean, she's probably, everyone's thinking that she's going to go pro because she does have the potential.
Yeah.
Because if you ever get a chance, they're going to be playing on, I think, what is it, Wednesday?
I think Thursday.
Wednesday or Thursday.
It's like during the day. But like, if you want to see some highlights, like she is
Stella Johnson.
Yeah,
but
she's a killer.
That's another good question. Like, I was thinking. So she goes to Rider. There's a lot of big schools, say UConn and all those,
Baylor,
Stanford. So what do you think a player like that who goes to Rider, who wants to make it to the pros, what is that like? What do you think their mindset should be? How do they overcome that kind of standing?
Well, that's a good question, Noah. And you got a lot of examples of that kind of thing that happens.
Yeah.
Kobe is kind of like that. I mean, he didn't come from college. He
came
from Lower Merion School District. And then you get Carson Wentz. I'm a big Philadelphia fan.
Yeah.
So Carson Wentz. They didn't have enough guys for the field up in Dakota all the time. And then he goes to this little college, and he knows he's good, and the scouts come and watch him, and everyone knows he's good, and he's got time. He's got stopwatches involved, so it's apples to apples comparison. So you know just what kind of an athlete he is. So they figure it out. I'm sure your Stella Johnson has some kind of idea that while she's playing for Rider, she could probably play for a much more competitive, challenging, ambitious D1 team.
Yeah.
But is she going to get as much a chance to shine?
Well, if you guys know her name, your Rider students, but if you know that she's big time and she responds and she's going to be one of the players, the best player on her team, scouts will,
easily look at that and say.
They'll take a look. The scouting these days is so intense.
Yeah.
The numbers are they're everywhere. So everyone knows the numbers.
Yeah.
So scouts are out there. And if they hear of a Stella, that's a great thing for a professional sports organization to be able to know that someone might be undervalued because they're a Rider. So maybe we'll pick her up in a lower round. WNBA draft comes along, we'll pick her up in a lower round and get her for a steal.
Yeah.
It's a business.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because that's what Lynn said when they were scouting her out of high school. She was kind of undervalued, and Lynn was like, "Why isn't anyone looking at this girl who's a baller?" And they took her and developed and groomed her, and now look where she's gone. So it's just a great story. But we got
one more thing on that. Oh, you got to go.
Yeah, we got to go to break.
Go.
All right,
I'll get back. We'll pick up.
Yeah,
Definitely.
So we'll pick up with Joe. Again, it's a very special edition of the Sports Fever. We'll be right back after some underwriting announcements, only on 107.7 The Bronx and 107.7thebronx.com. And Joe, before we had to go to commercial break, you had one last thing regarding our star player, Stella Johnson.
Okay, yeah, Stella. So Stella's a star at Ryder, and I guess the issue was, was she in the right spot? And maybe she could have competed at a higher level at a maybe more high-profile program.
Yeah.
Like a UConn.
Baylor.
Yeah, great women's
Big-time
programs.
school.
Big-time school. So there's two schools of thought on that. It's like the big fish in the little pond or the little fish in the big pond kind of thing. So here she is at Little Ryder. Little. No offense.
Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah, it's fair.
Fair compared to those other programs we're talking about.
Yep.
And she's, the big player on campus. So she gets playing time from the time she's a freshman through senior year. So from a developmental perspective, she's working and getting better a lot faster than she might have at a UConn, where she might have just gotten lost, or Baylor. She just gets lost and she doesn't play her freshman year. She gets some minutes in sophomore year. And who knows if she develops. People at this age level are developing quickly. Like I was saying in the break to know, it's like Larry Bird. Even Bird, he was a great player becoming a pro. He learned a new way to score every summer.
Reinventing. Yep,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, that's what you need. You
And-
need a different arsenal.
Yeah, and I just was looking at, because we were talking about we weren't there freshman year. Or her freshman year. And, she appeared in 33 games and made 32 starts. So
she was in the fire right away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then she was named to the MAC All-Team, our rookie team. So
Yeah.
she was one of those players who, from the beginning,
Yeah.
you knew she was something special.
Yeah, and then I remember too. We were talking about Carson Wentz. Same
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
deal.
Because he went to Dakota.
Yeah, he gets a lot of experience up there, and people know he's a great athlete because you got the stopwatch.
Yeah.
You got all the data on him from the combine, so he's a great guy.
Yeah. No, out of there. I mean, no, you got so many questions.
Yeah. Do we have time, you think, to do
Well,
Pick your favorite.
I would say maybe like a quick one because I have to go
Yeah.
because we have to go back into break. And
Okay.
Then we'll come out.
How about this? We'll do a moment in sports history. Okay. So I was just thinking, is there any moment that comes to mind when you think of just great great focus, great sports psychology, something you reference to say, hey, that's a great job by an athlete?
Okay, so again, I'm a Philly guy.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I would reference the greatest football play of all time. And that's a team effort. But from a sports psychological, and of course, the play I'm talking about, everyone listening must know about Philly. And so that's a perfect example. That's sports psychology in action right there. That's the culmination of a whole year of wearing dog masks because they're the underdogs in every game. So what a perfect way to spend. You've got nothing to lose the whole year.
It's true.
And here we are. So, I'm Nick Foles. I walk up to Peterson. Hey, coach, what about Philly? He's like, okay.
We'll do it.
Yeah. Everything's on the line. Let's do
Let's do it.
crazy thing.
And
everyone's relaxed. And then you get your third string, former college quarterback, tight end, Trey throwing the ball and the direct snap to the third string running back, and the quarterback scores the touchdown.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. Second string quarterback for that matter.
Yeah.
So, nothing to lose. We're the whole way, and that was game after game after game they came back. So that's, I guess, to wrap it up and put it in sports psychological terms, now you're talking about a mindset. Now you're talking about I got nothing to lose. The direct opposite of Gary Delabate. I got the stupid thing to do, the easiest thing to do in the world, and I can't do it.
And that's exactly what he said. He said, he was talking about it on the show, I think, and he was talking about how, it's pretty much a lose-lose. He should be able to get it to the plate, but the pressure's so high that if he doesn't, gets
Yep.
ripped to
Ripped
shreds
on.
on the show.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's in your head mentally. Next thing you know,
Yeah.
you
So
can't
this
have
is
the
what,
same.
as a sports psychologist and getting into the head of an athlete, this is what we're trying to recreate. In the Mamba case, this is who I am. This is what I do. Not only do I make the free throw, I make it especially well when it's everything's
The
on the line.
pressure. Yep.
Yeah.
And then from the other side of it, everything to lose versus nothing to lose. And I want my athletes to be thinking, I have nothing to lose. I'm out here, And, to put it in really Zen terms and get real philosophical about it, keeping death really close to you. What do I have to lose any minute of every day?
Yeah.
I'm going to die.
So
We're all going to die.
It's so precious. Yeah, life's so precious.
It's so precious, but you got to be ready to let it go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Give
and
it everything you
And in
got.
terms of when we come back, one thing I want to talk about next is in terms of the psychological aspect from a contract, because you brought up hockey with the 7-year deal, like how does that mean for a player psychologically? But also in terms of the baseball aspect, you have these guys that are making exuberant amount of money, and it's like, what does that go into play? But we'll get all to that and more after the top of the hour in the CCS Spotlight, only at 107.7 The Bronx and 1077thebronx.com. Now, Joe, new topic. I guess in terms of the mental side of these exuberant amount of contracts. I know Noah mentioned in his question about Chris Kreider of the Rangers, but I think what would probably be more suited to you is you're a big Philly fan, Mr. Bryce Harper. Last year, 13 years, 330. Was it 30 or
I think it was
33?
30, yeah, something like that.
$1 million.
Third of $1 billion
Yeah.
is what I always thought of it as.
Yeah.
Third of $1 billion.
Now, my question to you is, first of all, what were your thoughts as a fan? I'll get you straight as a fan. The moment you saw that hit your phone, that he's going there, he's kind of locked in, full no trade clause. He can't, he's locked in for good. And also, from a psychological aspect of Harper, what does that mean for him? Because he didn't do so hot last year, and this is a guy that was supposed to be the LeBron of baseball, and the LeBron of our baseball is Trout.
A lot of expectations for him, and a lot of still empty promises, and a lot of work to do. So definitely.
Well, I'll tell you, contrary to what you might expect from our discussion earlier, I was thrilled. I was absolutely thrilled. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But to me, he was a blue chip. That was a decision to pick up a blue chip guy for a long time. So you've locked in one position on your lineup for 13 years. You don't have to worry about him at all. Now, that picks up a liability too, because you got what if he gets injured? What if he does fall off? But the facts of the matter for last year, he wasn't that far off his career averages last year. He wasn't the new LeBron, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't know how history is going to treat this. He already has 3 homers this year, so I'm endlessly optimistic about it. He could put out 40 or 50 this year. It's theoretically. Is he at his prime yet? Probably. His next few years should be his prime years.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I still want to be optimistic about it. I'll put it that way. As far as he's concerned about the psychology that you're faced with as a Bryce Harper, couple issues on that. Number one, these guys. I think he was in Sports Illustrated when he was in high school.
Yeah, he was that's why I said, because LeBron was the chosen one, and he was the chosen one.
So he's known. He's known that he's been really, really good for his whole life. So his sports psychology is already really strong. He's a great mental athlete. He has to be playing at the top of his game for so long. So for a guy like that, it's hard to teach him stuff. But to hold on to that would be the key. So I guess one of the things that could enter into your mind, if you're again with the self-talk, the things we say to ourselves, that one of the things could be in his mind, I got this in the bag. I don't even have to show up, and I'm going to be making a third of $1 billion.
Yeah.
And if that creeps into your mind and you lose the hunger, then you're not the same player that you used to be.
Wow.
So the hope that anyone signing that check is having is that this guy's going to be able to maintain his hunger like he has all the way. It feels like a safe bet for someone who seems to be as blue chip mentally and physically as he is.
Now, in terms of like these big crowds and like the injury aspect, does that have to do anything? Because I've noticed a lot in, all aspects of sports where like a guy is kind of durable throughout like his first couple years in the league, and then he signs that massive deal, and that's when the injuries start to happen. So what do you think that has to do with the whole thing? Do they just say to themselves, oh, I don't have to try anymore, I don't have to train anymore, let me just do what I got to do?
That's a good question.
It is a great
That's
question.
A great question.
I don't think it has as much to do with the training aspect, because he and guys in those positions train. Like LeBron is, obsessive compulsive about training.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he just takes care of his body.
$1 million on his body every year.
Every year. So, and Harper seems to be that kind of guy, real, workout kind of guy, gives everything he's got. I think the biggest one is the other one you said, which is, I got it in the bag. I don't have to. I'm going to change the way I think somehow.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to put out 100. I'm not going to. And just the other week, I think it was just last week, he said I'd run through a wall, literally, for the fans of Philadelphia to play for this team.
Yeah.
And I think that's how he plays. And you see this guy making $350 million, sacrificing his body to make plays. And that's how he has to. And counterintuitively, that's how you avoid injury. So you're holding back. That's the classic line, and I believe it. If you're holding back, then when you're tentative and you're not giving everything you got, that's when you get injured. And unfortunately, I think that's what some folks do when they sign the big contract. I got to protect this. I got to stay healthy. And you got to really give it everything all the time, because that's how you got to where you were.
Yeah.
And that's why you weren't injured up till now. Do the things that you've always done that got you here.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of holding back, I think football should be more like that, just because of the fact that their money isn't all guaranteed.
Yeah.
For basketball and baseball, just do what you have to do, like you said, because it's all guaranteed money. So,
Yeah, and I think that's a good point about football, because of just how dangerous it can be. These are guys, especially like, you go to the running back position. These are guys who play for what, till maybe they're 27, 28, like maybe into their late 20s. I mean, like a guy like Adrian Peterson, who's still going,
or Lynch.
Lynch.
That's unheard of.
So rare.
And especially Adrian Peterson is still this past season was playing at a high level. But it is interesting that you say like it's exactly what gets you into that position of being injury prone, is just not having the same mindset as you did.
Now, there's guys, it brings to mind Eric Dickerson. I don't remember. No,
Yeah.
Great running back.
Yeah.
And he would mitigate risk by just padding everything. Yeah. So he was padded head to toe, and he could still move. He's still a world-class sprinter kind of guy, and strong. And that's a different way to mitigate the problem. So he's still giving everything. He's still giving 100%. He's just padded all over.
And just being more safe, I guess. But still, it's in a different way, because you're still, like you said, giving everything you got.
It takes a toll on your body. You got to do something.
Yeah.
It's always good to keep that aspect. I remember, I think Dwayne Wade also, like late in his career, he would have like the T-shirts with like so much padding around the ribs and
flak
also the
jackets.
stomach. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, like I think he had like a black undershirt.
It was
like all around.
the padding. Yep. So.
I mean, because he was injury prone. His knees were giving out and everything, but that's what you have to do. But I think you want to get into this next one, Mr. 5 goals.
Mika Zibanejad, yeah. Okay, so this was actually, again, this is Anthony, and he said that Joe wanted to talk about the Mika Zibanejad because you heard about it. Yeah. And you said you're not into hockey, but it's still a huge thing. I would say, watch for an SB moment, of the year. Yeah. It's one of those moments that I won't forget. It was just one of those, like, is this really happening? Yeah. And I just wanted to know, from, like, how do you know that this moment's special? How do you handle that? The adrenaline, all those things compounding. What is that like? What do you do to handle that?
Yeah. Did you see the interview with him afterwards?
I
I just happened to pick it up.
And he was speechless.
He was kind of speechless.
Yeah.
He was like super humble. He almost like, and I don't know what he is like normally.
He is like that.
He's kind of a shy guy.
He's one of those, but he's one of those. He kind of commands respect. He's considered he's gonna be probably the captain. Him or Chris Kreider for the Rangers.
They're the co-captains, I heard.
Right now. And next year, I think he's gonna get the C on his chest. But he is one of those guys already. But he even said, like, I'm kind of speechless right now. But he usually has something to say during the important to say after the games.
Yeah, so I guess you're in that position. You've already done what you needed to do from a sports perspective.
Yeah.
You were in flow for that game. Are you guys familiar with that term, the concept of flow?
Can you explain?
I mean, like, you mean like in terms of like they're like in a zone?
In the
yeah, that's
zone.
what I'm
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
good.
okay, yeah. But that's
I felt like that was a trick question for a good second, at least from my take.
Maybe it's a little tricky because there is actually a well-defined concept. Of, it's a construct
Yeah.
of flow. And this psychologist, can I tell this story?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, Hungarian psychologist, used to be the president of the American Psychological Association, big hitter in the psychology world.
Yeah.
So he gave, back in the day, this is in the 70s, he had this huge experiment where he gave out beepers back in the day, beepers to thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people. And his instruction to them, they were randomly would go off. His instruction to them is when it goes off at a random time, just tell me what you were doing and how you felt. And he got large numbers, which is great for psychological studies in terms of statistical reliability. So he got this, and then based on those findings, he crunched all the numbers and wrote this great book called Flow. And it actually showed when people are happiest. And it's not what you might think. Like TV watching, not a recipe for happiness. People who were beeped when they were watching TV answered, I'm not really happy. You're just sitting on the couch, you're not doing much, you're just watching TV, kind of passing time, waiting to die, that kind of thing. You know, the stuff like gardening, playing sports, always is good. Driving a car, doing your favorite hobby. That's when you're in a challenging position, but not so challenging to be frustrating. You know, and that's in sport. That's when people can get lost in the game. And Dr. J would be he'd just be in the bubble, and no one could touch him.
Yeah.
And this is where this man was, Mika, the other night. And so things happen too. And again, I don't know. I'm not a hockey guy per se, but I do know, like Wayne Gretzky. They said he would just follow the puck, like kind of mindlessly when he would watch it on TV, watch film, and he would just follow where the puck was and let that sink in. And so, lo and behold, when the game starts, he just happened to be where the puck was all the time because he knew the rhythm of hockey. And this is what Mika had to have fallen into that.
Yeah.
Part of it's luck. You happen to be where the puck is when the puck gets there.
Yeah.
But part of it's a feel for the game. I know where I'm anticipating, and I can pick off. I don't know if he's a student of the game. He might be studying his opponents really well, too. And it might have to do with the structure of the Rangers. Maybe they have a really good format. Or he understands it really well.
Yeah.
And he knows what his own team is. So he was in the flow, whatever, that night. And I think, from other athletes and, my brief, experience as an athlete too, it's almost an embarrassing thing when everything's going in. And you see Michael Jordan one time, I remember clearly, he just put his hands up like,
Shrug,
another one in.
Yeah.
They're all going in tonight.
It's almost like they think, oh, this is not fair at this point.
I think you lose yourself, and again with the Zen thing, it's almost like now I'm part of something bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm almost the vehicle. I'm just facilitating the ball going in.
Yeah.
It's just happening. I'm the event. It's happening, and that's how he was.
And you know what? These past few games, and before that game, he had been playing really good hockey. He was scoring. He would wherever the puck was, he was right there and making plays. And as a team, though, it wasn't coming together. They had lost a couple tough games against the Flyers and stuff. So from game to game, where do you think that comes in, that flow? Like, I know it's a different time, but from game to game, how do you think that affects?
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds to me like he's been in kind of the mode of flow for a while now.
Yes.
He's had and that's not uncommon in sports. You'll see guys go for a few games and do really well.
Special things, yeah.
Yep.
I think it has to do with a lot of things. There's a lot of physical stuff that goes on. You might be eating well, getting a good night's sleep. You're getting a lot of positive feedback the whole time. When all that stuff comes in, you stay in that groove, and then the next game just gets that much easier.
Wow, it's so interesting. And that's funny you say that because Friday I think it was Thursday into Friday, and he didn't sleep after the game because he's from
Sweden.
Yeah. And
But he's Persian.
yes, but
Yeah.
he got it was a different time, so he got text from his family, like a bunch of them at like 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
You know,
Different time zones.
Yeah, but like it's interesting that again, like it all compounds, and he scored a goal yesterday. So
Did
like
he? Yeah.
yeah, so it's like it's just all that success and all the people around you, kind of feeding into that must have a great.
He's a lucky guy right now. He's in a positive feedback mode.
Yeah.
So he's taking things in. His dad's Persian, his mom's Finnish.
Yeah, that's so yeah.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
some background on him too. I just checked him out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So which not two great hockey countries. Well, Finland, I guess, but not Persia.
But yeah, that's kind of out of
It's
nowhere.
just kinda
Yeah,
like,
yeah, like Finland, pretty good, but Persia,
Persia,
yeah. I mean, but
in
it's
any
interesting.
event, so he's getting that feedback and that he's handling it the right way. And I guess when you're not in that, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
How do you get out of that?
Get out of
hole?
it, yeah.
And then you again with self-talk, identity, you got to start imagining yourself to be that way.
And I think that is kind of a good segue because I was thinking of another, like, have you seen or been a part of, or watched a moment where you're like, the sports psychology is kind of off, that they're trying to get into a rhythm and it's just not jiving.
like they're forcing it.
yeah, like whether it's a team, whether it's a player, something's not right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I saw it. Thank you. That was a good question. I gave that a lot of thought. And it's interesting the way that plays out. There's a couple different kinds of skills in sport, closed skills and open skills. Closed skills are things that you do that you don't really have an opponent standing in your way. An open skill is you're in the heat of competition. So, for example, golf is pretty much an entirely closed skill sport. It's just you and the ball. I mean, you're playing against guys, but
it's not as
they're not stopping
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
It's just you who can stop you.
Going with
Yeah.
the flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's hard to answer that question without looking at who you're playing to.
Okay,
In a
yeah.
team sport aspect, because sometimes you will face someone who has an overwhelming mental and maybe even physical advantage over you.
and there's almost nothing you can do. It's just it's gonna happen.
So that's
with-
just kind of a preface to my answer.
Okay,
It's like,
yeah.
You got to take that into account.
But, yep.
But it's a good question nonetheless. And if you control for that, as it were, and you look at folks who have kind of fallen apart, it was a hard question too, because some of my heroes have fallen apart. It's hard to look at that. And so I was doing a little research on your question, and I came up with the first one I came up, and this dates me again to Freddie Brown. I don't know if you remember, but way back when Georgetown and North Carolina were playing in March Madness, and Georgetown was going to win the game, and Fred Brown was a guard and he was not going to go on. That was going to be his last game. He's done with that March Madness, and he's playing a stacked North Carolina team, including James Worthy. And so at one point, Fred Brown didn't pass to his own man by mistake. He passed to James Worthy. And Worthy just took it down and slammed it. And then Georgetown goes on to lose the game. It's just like, I felt so bad. Another guy in my fraternity actually called him and said some not very nice stuff to Brett Brown.
oh no.
So,
But that's interesting because
so why did he throw?
Yeah.
Of all people,
Yeah.
James,
Yeah.
you threw the Hall of Fame
Yeah.
basketball player. That's the end.
yeah.
So why do you do that? And that's your question. How do you fall apart like that?
Yeah.
And I can only say that's distraction and lack of attention. What's behind Fred Brown? Not it, because they had the powder blue, and Georgetown had the gray.
Yeah.
It's even, you can tell.
Yeah,
You can tell that
that's-
guy's not on your team.
Yeah.
And everyone in Georgetown, everyone on Georgetown's team has heard James Worthy's name all week long. That's all they've been. Whatever you can do, keep your eye on James Worthy. So it's an attentional thing, which is a big topic in sports psychology. How do you maintain intensity? This might, Anthony, be a good time to recite Shikantazaa.
Do you want to do that when we come back from
Yeah,
break? All right,
yeah.
yeah. So when we come back, we'll have Joe do that for us, all that and more on the Sports Fever, only at 107.7 The Bronx and 1077thebronx.com. Before we came back into the show, Don was ranting about how everyone praises LeBron, but no love for Kawhi. Dom, I'll say this: is it because from my understanding, it's like why it's like that is because I think LeBron is more personable with the media and the fans, and Kawhi, he's a robot.
I mean, I get that. Kawhi is a very quiet gentleman. And then you got LeBron, who always has to say something to the media. But I did accept the thing he said that he wouldn't play basketball if the arenas were empty.
Yeah.
I accept that because I think it's getting ridiculous with this whole Corona stuff now. But
Coronavirus.
the virus, yeah. But that's for another day. But yeah, no, it just bothers me when Kawhi makes this. He pitches Paul George coming to the Thunder in a trade. It happens. He creates this super team, and everyone's like, oh, you didn't join LeBron. But when he creates super teams, it's amazing to watch. It's just history in the making. Even for Durant, as much as he kind of changed as a player to where he kind of became, not so nice towards fans and stuff, he will go to the Warriors. I get it. He went to a 73-9 team, but everyone rips him. LeBron going to the Lakers. He leaves Cleveland twice. Oh, no, talk about that. He leaves his hometown twice, Anthony.
I mean, okay, but then again, it's like, okay, he left. I mean, okay,
I get it. He got him a ring.
The first time was bad. The second time, he lived up to the promise.
I get it. He got him a ring, but then you leave him again, and then go to another big market. It's just,
He's just looking out for his future.
It's all about Taco Tuesday.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
that's really
Taco Tuesday.
that brought him back.
I've not seen a video from him in a while.
There was one a couple weeks ago I saw with his family, but I mean,
I think Davis was there.
Yes, he was.
He
He
was.
was. So maybe it was Davis. But yeah. So
where do we go eat again?
We went to
I
Surf
keep
Taco.
thinking Shake Shack.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
We went to Surf Taco before this.
Yeah. Now I want a taco. Let's go back.
We should go back.
Yeah.
But wait,
that was fun.
Can Joe? I want to see what Joe's gonna do with that thing.
So,
what is it? I forget what it's
some
called.
sort of, I guess.
We were building up with Freddie Brown and lack of attention, and so what do I do? So one of the so meditation's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So and a lot of athletes. So we were talking about Phil Jackson earlier. A lot of his disciples, the Kobe, the MJs, they're all meditating. They're on the mat many hours a day, and then you get that Djokovic, that tennis player, arguably the best tennis player in the world. He's on the mat every day, and a lot of great athletes now are too. So that's something that's kind of a blanket recommendation for all my clients. Meditate. It's a good thing to do, and that helps with attention. You can practice your attention abilities on the mat. So, it's a Buddhist kind of cultural thing. It's one of the tools that we. I don't care if you're Jewish or Catholic, and I'm not trying to convert people, but it's something from their culture that we, can use. It's a great thing. So there's various schools of meditation. One's called Shikantazaa. There's this school, and there is this passage that I use with my athletes that's from a Zen master from centuries ago. You ready?
Yeah.
I'm ready.
We're ready.
I'm so ready.
There's a lot of build-up for this.
Oh, maybe Noah's not ready.
So much build up
Might
that
not be
Noah
ready. Go
broke
ahead.
the mic.
Keep doing it. This happens sometimes.
Yeah,
So,
it's
okay.
always Noah's mic,
Keep going.
too.
Keep going.
Shikantazaa is the mind of someone facing death. Imagine that you're in a duel of swordsmanship, the kind that used to take place in ancient Japan.
Mhm.
As you face your opponent, you are constantly vigilant, set, and ready. If you were to relax this vigilance, even momentarily, you would be cut down instantly. A crowd gathers to watch the fight. Since you are not blind, you can see them out of the corner of your eye. Since you are not deaf, you can hear them. But not for a moment is your mind captured by these impressions.
That's.
Cool, huh?
that
You
is
ready to go?
really
cool.
Now, are you ready to fight now?
Like you said, that pumped me
Are
up.
you focused? What can't you do now? And can you how much can you maintain that? Is that something that you could maintain 24/7, or certainly when you were within the lines the whole time?
Yeah.
And I would suggest Freddie Brown wasn't there when he
Yeah.
threw the ball to James Worthy. He had certainly relaxed his vigilance at that time.
So you would say that's about building that mindset, like just that. It's just
How about it? What if you could recreate that and walk onto the court or the golf course and bowling alley and walk in with Shikantazaa, the mind of someone facing death, And that's what I mentioned death earlier. That is,
Yeah.
that's the ultimate extension of this. What do you have to lose? And I would argue you don't really have anything. And if you can challenge yourself to that, you can do a Mika every night.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Huh. I think it all comes back to that. Interesting. Trying to think what else we want to mention here. Dom, do you have anything that you want to talk about from
Well, I'm a little upset right now because of the game, but
of
you
the
know,
Clippers?
Well, you name it. I'm sorry, I haven't looked at sports news really. Like today, I haven't really looked at anything. Oh, what about Kenny Atkinson?
What the mental?
I mean, yeah, it's your team, so.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I'm a big Brooklyn Nets fan, and head coach Kenny Atkinson was recently. They said they mutually parted ways, and it was kind of a shock to the NBA because it's like this guy was a great coach. The Nets were a team that were really down in the dumps. Like they did the massive trade. I don't know if you remember with KG and all them,
Yeah.
and it wrecked the whole organization. And he was kind of that piece that kind of built us back up to where we are now with Katie and Kyrie, and then he just leaves. And everyone's like, okay, why? And the word comes out is that he didn't want to coach Kyrie and Katie because they were going to be ready opening day. And I think he didn't want to deal with them and their antics and stuff. So
He didn't want to specifically?
That's what I'm hearing.
So then that is like a thing to talk about. How does the team? Because if that's the case, that a team hears that about, or Kyrie hears that about themselves, Kevin Durant hears that about themselves, or how do they like? Do you think that that's the kind of thing where they want to change who they are, or want to and also changing who they are, like you've talked about, is not always the best thing, especially when you're such a special athlete or special player. So like. Just talk about that, like what that is like, that culture.
Well, the other thing that's really unfortunate about professional sports now is the power differential between athletes and coaches.
Yeah.
This
So
is
now
this is a huge topic.
It's a
Yeah.
huge problem that, and this is happening in Philadelphia. Everyone's calling for
Brett
the coach.
Brown.
Brett Brown.
Right.
Yeah,
Everyone's
okay.
calling for his head,
Yeah.
too. And, can you really, you're not going to let go of Embiid. You're not going to let go of
Yeah.
Simmons.
So the
they
coach
make
loses.
a lot more money than the coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to be responsible for a lot more wins than the coach, too, really. But that's not how that's not what John Wooden envisioned. That's not how
Yeah.
the game's supposed to be played. You need someone running the show.
We were gonna do a topic on that, like kind of with the coaches and the salary and how it's like different.
Yeah, for collegiate sports, because it's you flip it, it's the other way around.
It's the other way around.
Yeah.
Where
That
in the
is-
NCAA they have the power.
Yep.
It's like no one can win here. So like in the NCAA, the players are not happy that the organization, the NCAA as a whole, gets the power. But in the NBA, I don't support all these players, especially in basketball too, to where I'm not a fan of Adam Silver as a commissioner, and I just think it's ridiculous that we don't even have home and road uniforms anymore, specifically, to where the reason why the players have so much power now. They can say what they want, especially like a big name like LeBron out there or any guy out there that's a big name for the franchise, and really just take control. And
Yeah.
instead of Adam Silver, he'll just accept it and say, okay, this is for the league now. And I think for any sport too. So
If I throw my opinion in here right now, it's a shame, and it's unfortunately I think it's an indictment against the athletes because it should be. I always heard about the relationship between Grant Hill and Coach K, and Coach K used to look at Grant Hill in the locker room and say he's making me a better coach because Grant Hill gave him everything. He gave him all the control, and Grant Hill's a better athlete than Coach K ever was, and knew the game. He was a precocious student of the game too, and he would look at him like, "Tell me what to do now, Coach." He would still be deferential to him, and that relationship was important to maintain, and that is what John Wooden thought about when he wrote the Bible, about basketball. That's how that relationship's supposed to be, because Coach K does know more about the game than some 20-year-old. I'm not trying to be ageist here.
No, yeah.
But Coach K knows the game.
Yeah.
And Grant Hill can learn a lot, and Grant Hill did.
Yeah.
That's what LeBron James knows basketball, but he doesn't know as much as his coach knows. He just doesn't. And why would you give up the opportunity to learn from someone. I think it's a big mistake that they make. And I'm not trying to cast aspersions on these gentlemen, these athletes. That's not what I'm here to do. I am here to say that some are better than others, and that some are more respectful and are improving on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I would hope and then that would erase these problems that we're having with the deficit to a great extent.
Definitely. That is such a good point. And we, in a lot of our classes, since we are sports media majors, and Anthony focuses on sport a lot with that sports studies minor, right? You do have
Yeah.
We talk a lot about symbiotic relationships, whether it's with the media
Moore.
and Dr. Moore talks about it with the media and players, and like you were just saying with coaches and players, that's a huge thing. So what is that? How does relationships, whether it's coaches, whether it's people in your life, families, how does that affect a mindset or sports psychology?
Yeah, so it speaks to leadership and what kind of ball player do you want to be?
Yeah.
And you don't have to go far to find examples of folks who have all the natural gifts, have even the mental skills,
Yeah.
but they have the physical skills, mental skills, and they're not on the same page as everyone else on their team. So you're not a good team player, and the coach is part of the team. So if you don't have respect for everyone on your team, how can you really contribute? And it's almost a lack of integrity. And so you're really kind of screwed right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because now my team's in disarray. How can we possibly, get together? There's some exceptions to that. The Yankees had, a couple of squads where they'd get in fist fights in the locker room, and then they went on. But that's a real exception. By and large, you talk about one of your questions asked me, about great moments in sports.
Oh,
So
yeah.
When you're talking about the greatest. Maybe the greatest of all time is the Miracle on Ice. Again, I'm not a hockey guy, but I was around.
Yeah.
Do you believe in miracles? I listened to that on the TV, and that was all about team cohesion. I'm getting together with this guy named Lee Elias right now, who is a hockey guy. He was a hockey player and a professional coach, and I'm doing podcasts with him and whatnot. And he's a great businessman. He's a great coach. He coached a professional team in England. Actually, they have professional hockey in England. I didn't know. And he's all about team cohesion. So as a businessman, he goes out and talks to coaches and also in business. He'll go and coach business folks about how to be better teammates in their businesses. And that cohesion for that team was everything. Because I didn't realize how miraculous the Miracle on Ice was.
Yeah.
But they were career, you guys probably know, career hockey players, big, strong,
Huge,
talented men.
Massive.
And these were like little skinny college guys.
Yeah, they're amateurs.
They were amateurs. They were rank amateurs. And he drilled them. They practiced a long time. They lived together. It was just a lot of cohesion that brought them together. They knew that they could depend on each other the whole time, and they took advantage. And if that had happened, the Miracle on Ice had been tested 20 times, they would have lost 19
of them.
But they were there for that time that they had the chance.
At the right time,
Yeah.
they did it. But that's a great example. It's almost like bigger than sports that moment. So I wouldn't have even thought of it, but it's a perfect example of just everything coming together the play was came together, the mindset was perfect, and it all came together, and they went on to beat. Who did they beat in the final? Was it Finland? Yeah, it was Finland. So
Mika was
and the Persia. Persia was. I don't think Persia was a part
no,
of
they
it.
didn't
But
go that far. Eliminated in the first round. Persia.
I don't even know if they were in it, but
lost to Kuwait.
But that's so interesting. That's a great.
And you generalized it to relationship, and it does go beyond sport too. What can I do for you today? That's a good thing for someone in a relationship to say. And that's, just like the goalie. How can I help you? Okay, and now I'm going to tell you, you got to, cover the winger coming down the winger. I got to talk. I got to communicate. We have to be on the same page. We have to have a common goal. Eat, sleep, and drink together.
Yeah,
we're in this.
Yeah, and that's something you can't always teach, that cohesion on a team.
No, that's the challenge.
Yeah,
and that Herb Brooks was a master at that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of teams should probably I mean, that's something that's, I think, a lost art in all sports now, per se, you know?
Like the team aspect of it.
Yeah, because everyone just thinks it's just there's one guy, and it goes for all sports, you know? So I feel like a lot of teams, you know, they have the talent, but they don't have it all
to put it together.
Yeah.
They just think, oh, let's just, because everyone says on paper they look great, but when they step on the court, they don't live up to it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
That Peterson, that coach for the Eagles, is I think that's his. We were talking about superpowers last week.
Yeah.
That's kind of his superpower.
Yeah.
And they're not. It's not the new norm. You know, they haven't won 2 more Super Bowls after that one, but that's why they won that one, I think. And I think that's why they play as well. I mean, they got beat up this year, the Eagles, back to Philly sports again.
Yes.
Yeah.
They couldn't field a team. They had third
Yeah.
stringers playing the whole game.
Yeah.
Guys pulling guys off the street to be wide receivers.
Yeah.
And they still played well. And it's all about that team aspect, that cohesion.
Yeah, and that's a good example. Doug Peterson's a perfect
Truly
example
is.
of that.
Yep.
He got his team, especially in a year that they had some injuries, obviously Carson Wentz, and got him to play and win the championship.
I mean, it's the same thing that goes for Aaron Boone. We were in the same predicament last year at the Yankees. Everyone just it was
Went down.
It was an MLB record,
Yeah.
and we won 103 games. And everyone's saying now, as we're injuries left and right, and news coming out, oh, a Judge had a broken rib dating back to September, and Gary Sanchez has a sore back, and it's just all this other stuff. And everyone's like, oh, we'll be fine. But it's like it all was like a miracle almost, like you guys were talking about in the Miracle on Ice.
Yep.
So you can't. It's almost like.
How can you duplicate
You
what
can't.
happened?
It's really hard, and I don't think we're gonna be able to do that again.
No. And that's why things need to start changing within the organization. But
but Boone's not the problem.
And I agree, but it's like there is a problem because this is not the normal. This is not the norm to say everyone's getting injured, and maybe it is players not having the right mindset or players not. But you would hope that as a baseball organization they come together and do it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So
you would think too. It's a business.
Yeah.
So you have recruiting.
Yeah.
And what do you want? You want a guy who's the 4.29, 40. You want that guy, or do you want the guy who's really going to support his teammates?
Yeah.
And that's harder to winnow out. The
Yeah.
one you give me the stopwatch, I'll tell you who is the fastest guy. How can you tell who's a leader? How can you tell who's going to be a good teammate and who's going to manage the locker room well? That's a little tougher to figure out. But the ones who the personnel folks who can figure that out, that's a key factor for success in professional sports.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I mean, it goes back to the '90s with Gene Michael. He picked out Mr. Jeter, and we were off to the promised land.
And if you always talk about Derek Jeter, he always said, I may not be the best athlete, but I'm going to outwork you. I'm going to work harder than you.
When he's on that field for those 3 hours or however long, he's going to outplay you.
Yeah, exactly.
I was looking at Chase Utley too when
That's another good
same
one.
kind of going back to Philly.
Yeah.
Total leader, always in the
Philly
game.
loves him.
Yeah.
But not
really
necessarily the best athlete.
No,
he's
just
not.
put his heart out
he might
there.
get into the Hall, and I think he has less than 2,000 hits,
Yeah.
but he might get into the Hall.
Yeah.
So 5 or 6 years, he really cranked it out, and the whole time he was a complete leader, and he was always talk about Shikantazaa. He was right on the money all the time.
Yeah, and I think it's a perfect time too, because now the baseball writers aren't really looking at. I mean, they're looking at the big stats, but they're looking more of the WAR and all the other analytics stuff, so that that could play in his favor when he does come up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When he's down for consideration.
Yeah.
Do we have break? Because I want to quickly get into the war if I can.
you want to get into.
Just for a second.
I mean, we got to go to break right now.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so
When we get back.
Yeah, so when we go to break, we'll wrap things up with Joe, and Dom will give his take on, I guess, the war aspect.
I'm just not a fan of it.
Are
I
you-
find it really confusing too. That doesn't help, but yeah, we'll get into that.
All right, yeah. All right, so we'll get into that and all more on the Sports Fever, only on 107.7 The Bronx and 107.7thebronx.com. Now, before we get into our last topic with our special guest, Dom, you want to talk about the war aspect in baseball and how, you were just really confused about it and don't understand really why kind of the league has kind of grasped onto this stat.
I'll start. Mark DeRosa, bouncing around the league a little while. He's a good utility player, but man, he thinks he knows everything. He takes that 1-2 pitch, steps out of the batter's box, adjusts his batting gloves, and goes back in ready for the next pitch. Mark DeRosa talks about war more than I talk about the Clippers. It is unbelievable.
And that's a lot.
The first thing he says, he's definitely definitely a Hall of Famer. Look at his WAR. I don't get it. 65.6, 37.9. I'm like, what? Wins above replacement. I really don't understand it. Like Mike Trout is leading in WAR when compared to Kenny Griffin Jr. I really don't understand it. It's like a new stat that has just came up for like all of a sudden. That is like a huge part of determining whether a player is good or a Hall of Famer even. It's just, I don't get it.
I think it's like the fact of, I know if you look on it based on like their season, it's like you look at their WAR, it's like you take them off and that's how many wins you lose if they're not on the team. So I understand it from that aspect. But in terms of overall, it like that's where I'm confused, where it's like a guy like Jeter is like a 65.6. Well, what does that mean? Does he mean like he's like averaging 65, like he contributes those 65 wins out of however many, like 98, did he contribute 65 of those wins of the 114?
Like how does it really affect
what does that mean? I mean, I don't know, maybe you can look it up and we can talk about it more when we come back. Not next week because we're on break. So it would be
stop, don't say those words.
It would be the
22nd
before Ned Bigby.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I meant Devin Werkheiser.
We'll definitely talk about it more. We should get more into WAR.
Yeah, no, I just find it as there's a lot of stats, especially in baseball, that I feel like are pointless, especially the WAR.
That's fair. Or there's another one too. I forget. It's like XOBS or something like that. I'm just like, what? What's something Brian Kenny says?
Yeah, ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Yeah, Brian Kenny's all about sabermetrics. But nevertheless, I guess we have one more topic. I guess kind of. What is it?
Just the differences between sports and psychology, and we'll kind of end on that and the show on that kind of.
All right, so that's a good question. I thought and it gave that some thought to it, and I think if you, strictly speaking, answering that specific question, I think baseball kind of stands out of the top three. Because you got continuous action sports in basketball and hockey, and to a certain extent football too. You know, where it's really a team. Yeah. And baseball, sure, it's a team, but everyone's expected to perform individually almost every second of every baseball game. You know, the grounder comes to me. I do it now. I know what to do it. I'm going to throw it the first base. Now, first baseman's turn. You know. Yeah. And there are some exceptions to that, but in general, that's the way it looks. Yeah. So, you know, it's like that's a big factor, a determining factor. And another reason that baseball stands out, and this is like a whole category of thinking about sport, is the nature of scoring sports games. So in baseball, it is the case that the game is never over. Yogi Berra said it ain't over until it's over. You know, but it's true. You know, as long as you're playing baseball, anyone can win. Yeah. And basketball, if you're down by 20 with 20 seconds to go, the game is over.
There's a time limit.
It's over. And football's the same way, and hockey's the same way. So, you know, you just can't. There's physical limitations to how much you can score in a certain amount of time. Yeah. But baseball, you're always in. So that's a different. Tennis is like this too. So the scoring has an effect psychologically on the athletes at the same time. And the other point that I want to make, and this is kind of an offshoot on that, is I think the positions played in sport account for a greater variability in terms of psychological aspects than the sports themselves. For example, I do work with the Villanova swimming and diving team. Swimmers and divers have a very different mentality. You think about football players, quarterback, you know, that's a creative, and I've got to be aware of what's going on in the field. You know, but you look at an offensive lineman, and I'm very structured. I have a very specific thing to do, with very specific skills to exact, and I'm constructive. And then you look at the D line, and my job is to just screw everything up. Yeah. I'm a destruction guy. I'm trying to create as much chaos as I can on the field. So very different psychological ways to approach the game.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure, guys. Yeah. It's been a lot of fun.